So the first thing that we're going to do is the parent function for sine. Zion, would you go ahead and close that door so that we don't hear the lunch interruption? Okay. So on your paper right now, I need for you to sketch this grid. I know it looks a lot different than what you're used to, but sketch this grid and then make a T-chart. And we're going to fill it in together. And what you'll do eventually as a group is recreate what we put here onto the big, huge graph paper and using yarn. Did anybody do this activity last year? Even my ninth graders didn't do it? Okay, good. Good. All right. Now, based on what you know about the unit circle, can anybody make a guess as to why I have it divided into 4 equal parts? The quadrantals, that's exactly right. So what we're going to do then is we're going to label each of these with the marks from the quadrantals. So what should come first? Let's do radians. Pi over 2. Okay. Pi. 3 pi over 2. 2 pi. Okay, and we're doing this again. Why? The quadrantals on the unit circle. We're labeling it with the quadrantals on the unit circle. Okay, now, in order to help us graph this a little bit better, I want you to go through and make marks exactly halfway in each of those. So right here, 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 and here. And this will help you place your yarn on your graph paper. That's right, Shelby. Those are the 45-degree marks. So let's don't call them degrees, let's do them in radians. So what comes first? Pi over 4. And I'm going to do these kind of small because they're just little helper marks. What about here? 3 pi over 4. Andrew knows his unit circle. What comes next? 5 pi over 4. 7 pi over 4. Okay, now, do you notice that this arrow continues to the left? So what does that mean? Okay, we are unrolling the sine graph in what direction? Counterclockwise. These are all positive. But if we thought about it in this direction, that would be clockwise. So those values would be negative. So now we're not going to graph one of those, but just imagine what would come next right there. There we go, negative pi. Okay, so you got your grid straight? This is the same grid that you're going to use for sine and cosine, so you'll only have to draw it once on your big graph paper. Okay. All right, now let's do a table of values. So this is the graph y equals sine theta. This is what we're graphing today. And it's called a parent function. So think back to whenever it was that you had polynomial functions, because we're all coming from so many different places. Do you remember what the parent function for a quadratic looks like? Show me in the air. This parent quadratic, right? Okay, so kind of like a horseshoe, centered at the origin, symmetric on either side. All right, show me in the air absolute value. What's the absolute value parent function look like? Looks like a B. Okay. What about cubic? Looks like an S going through the first quadrant and the third quadrant. Okay, what about y equals x? It's your straight line diagonally through the origin, through the first and the third quadrants. Okay, so what we're drawing today are the parent functions like that, but not for polynomials, but the trig values. Okay, so we're going to put the angle measures over here. So we'll call that theta on the left side. And then over here we need the sine of theta. So take these values and place them in the first column. So we'll start at 0 pi, pi over 4, pi over 2, all the way down to 2 pi. So you're going to finish this with your group. Okay. How do we get the sine value at those locations? You look at the ordered pair that corresponds to that angle and you pick the sine function out of it. So let's take 0 pi. What's the sine value at 0 pi? 0. What's the sine value at pi over 4? 32 over 2. And so forth, all the way down to 2 pi. You follow? Yes? Okay. What is this line? And how does it relate to something we did Friday in class? Remember the problem we had on WebAssign that was cosine of theta equals 8? And we said that can't happen? What do you think this line is up here? 1. That's right. So if we label it, this is y equals 1. And what about down here? You guys are awesome. Y equals -1. All right, now one more we got to label. What's this? This one? Well, it's still horizontal. It's y equals 0. Right? So we have what's called a midline, a max, and a min. Now do you see the relationship between what we were doing the other day? So remember we were talking about on the unit circle the radius is 1 and why that cosine value can't be 8? Why can the cosine value not possibly be 8? What will happen to the triangle? It won't close. If the radius is 1 and that's the biggest side of the triangle, there's no way that the x value can be 8. So the maximum value for the sine graph or the cosine graph is 1. The minimum value is -1. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you're going to plot those points like ordered pairs. So the first point is 0 pi 0. So where does it go? Just right here. And the next point that you'll plot will be pi over 4 root 2 over 2. What is that? How do you get that value? Put it in your calculator. That's why you have a calculator. So take your calculator and do root 2 over 2. I bet it's going to be 0.707. Is that right? Okay. So if that's 1, and you need to go up 0.707 or 0.71, can you see where approximately you would plot your point? Yeah. Okay, and then you'll do it all the way over to 2 pi. And then you're going to take a piece of yarn and you're going to tape it down into the shape of the sine wave. Making sense? Okay. How many of you have ever graphed the sine wave at all ever? Very, very few of you, I know, because we're all coming from so many different backgrounds. Okay. Now, the challenging part is this. When you're finished, I want you to try to answer these questions. I want to know, what do you think the domain is? I want to know, what do you think the range is? And I know we haven't talked about these vocabulary words, but I want you to try. What do you think the period is? What do you think the phase shift is? And what do you think is the amplitude? Okay, now, I'm going to show you this graph paper so that you can see how I want you to put it on here. Okay, every group's going to get one big piece of graph paper. I know. Alright. Alright, look. I want you to hold the paper like this. I want your vertical axis to be as tall as you can make it. And the easiest thing to do is to divide this paper in half and try to get 10 up and 10 down. And that makes it really easy to graph the 0.71. Okay? I want you to go all the way from maybe the second line all the way to the end. And here's why. You and your group members are going to be putting all 6 trig functions on this one paper. So if you make it really small, the yarn all runs together and you can't tell what you're doing. We're going to use a different colored yarn for every trig function. So the bigger we make it on here, the easier it's going to be for you to put everything on one grid. Okay? So here's what I have. One per group. Scissors. We're doing sine in green. Okay? Got that? Sine graph in green. I've got tape. Scissors, I got markers if you want markers. I have rulers if you want rulers. That's why I was thinking you might want graph paper for yours. Shelby, but look, I have graph paper. And then I'm going to give you until 11:25. And once everybody has got their sign graph done, we'll come back together, we'll answer these questions, and then we'll move on to the cosine graph. So by the time you leave here today, you'll have 2 graphs on this grid paper. Now, unfortunately, we ran out of the sticky paper, so this is no sticky at all. But I do have plenty of magnets. So if you wanted to put it on the whiteboard with the magnets, you can use that whiteboard over there. Just let me know, and I'll bring you some magnets. All right? Send one person up to get grid paper. That's bad. Do you want to? That paper's dead.
That's bad.
Like bad. On the board, like right in the mirror. I would do it in pencil first and then go over it with marker. Anybody else? Got plenty. All right. Green string, scissors. 11:25.
Try to get it in the middle though.